then quickly scan through my proposal and then look at the conclusion in terms of what type of benefits we hope to derive from popularizing informal science education and how it's going to help in stimulating economic development. So most countries in the world or economies of the world have passed through 3 phases. There's the industrialization phase, which came out of the agrarian into manufacturing. And in the Caribbean and a lot of the what are considered to be developing nations, most of it was done through the lowest strategy in terms of industrialization by invitation, where governments invited companies to come into their lands and exploit their natural resources in exchange for transferring of knowledge. However, if you look around, this is something that has seldom occurred. I mean, a prime example of that is Trinidad and Tobago. At one point in time, we had at least 3 automobile assembly plants. We had a steel mill, and the automobile plants have disappeared. And even today, we have not been able to make one part that goes into assembling automobiles. And so we moved from just pure agrarian to agro-processing. Then there was the post-industrialization, where economies evolved to start producing services. And you had to produce ideas, and some of the industries that evolved from that are the tourism and banking industries. However, as times changed and knowledge became the seed of power, economies evolved to be based on knowledge. And these economies are more intellectually, based on intellectual capital. And the development of intellectual capital is what really drives the new economy. It's about the creation of the goods and the services, not just producing them. And this requires a lot of applied research. In order to achieve such an economy, it is necessary to change the type of education which came out of the industrialization era, where we take individuals, students, citizens, and we put them through a step-by-step process and trying to give them a lot of knowledge as they move ahead. And in order to get an output at the end that can be absorbed into industries. What that has done is resulted in a lot of individuals being rejected from the education system because of the manner in which they learn, because they don't learn at the same speed as everybody their age, and because of what people perceive as the different learning styles not conforming to what the education systems have been trying to produce. So what came out of that is the evolution into STEM or STEAM education, where the science and technology that is integrated through arts and mathematics. Now, the arts here is really to infuse the ethical dimension that has been missing in the teaching of science and technology over the years. So, in terms of global competitiveness, there are 12 dimensions of it, dealing from the basic requirements from the institutions, macroeconomics, health, primary schools, efficiency enhancers, and the innovation and sophistication factors. The next slide shows where we in the Caribbean and Latin America are with respect to these things. And this is from the Global Competitive Index, this is 2018. And the only Caribbean, Latin American country, this is where we are in terms of CARICOM, the only CARICOM country that stands out to be above the average is Jamaica. However, all or most of us are far below the average on almost everything. And the only thing that Jamaica is ahead on is in terms of labor market efficiency. Now, that right there tells that we in this part of the world are really falling behind because we continue to hold on to the old paradigm of educating people. So this proposal looks at one of the reasons And this diagram here really highlights it. In Trinidad and Tobago, which is on the, this right-hand corner, at least on my screen, we spend less than $35 million on R&D annually. In a country that has a GDP of well over 27 billion at its lowest, we are spending less than 0.001% of our GDP into R&D. That itself does not allow the creation of the knowledge-based economy. If you look at the center of this chart, you see the economies and the amount of money they spend in R&D to continue being ahead. And if you look well, you will see that they are all the economies that are performing and are doing well. So, informal science education is just looking at your predominant teaching method to be one where you appeal to the different learning styles of individuals. A lot of it is founded in Ghana's different and multiple intelligences. So you do things, you develop materials, audiovisual materials, you do demonstrations, you do have a mentor system. You look at informal conversations where people actually learn from just interacting with each other. You have conferences and you have questions and answers. And all of that forms into a nice little model where you start with finding a hypothesis. You identify a problem, you have a hypothesis, you test the hypothesis, you gather data, and you keep refining it until you come up with a theory to explain why the problem is occurring. Then you go out, you make observations, you think about questions, you formulate hypothesis, and you keep, should I say, evolving and creating the answers. So within this form of exploratory learning, there's really no real answer, but you're forcing the individual to create the process of problem solving and about refining knowledge, which falls directly into the modern teaching paradigm of constructivism. And our present schooling systems does not really allow for this. The excuse by many of the educators is that we have a curriculum to stick to and we don't have time to allow that. Now, the National Institute of Higher Education, Research, Science and Technology, NIHUS, has been doing informal education since at least they were set up in 1984. And they have been doing informal education since about 1986. And they cater for individuals from just after preschool all the way up to adolescents, or even adults can participate in it, in some of their programs. Now, the objective of the proposal is really exposing citizens to STEAM curricula, mitigating the stigma associated with by static exhibits, challenging the students at the tertiary level institution, reducing the cost of informal education to regional territories, and that NIHUS is the only science center and the only organization in the Caribbean that actually deals with this form of informal science education and to stimulate problem solving and technology creation. So this is what the proposal seeks to do. And the model is not too difficult, but it's one where NIHUS sits in the center to coordinate the entire system, where the government provides policies, industry provides technologies, education provides the teaching methods, research, and any problems that are identified by any of these organizations are then sent to the tertiary level institutions, the universities that exist, and the students are given these problems throughout their life at the universities. And their job are to find solutions to real problems, which then goes back into the system, goes back to the relevant stakeholder. And that's where the informal teaching comes in terms of dealing with.
Dr. Ellis, can you write, please?
Oh, yes, no problem. So some of the benefits: economic activity, social values, industry will have critical thinkers, and then the learners themselves will be competent in different knowledge and skills. Conclusion, The present education system fails many. The informal science education democratizes education, creating and supporting an ecosystem between the TLIs, industry, and government. Coded by NIHUS will benefit all, and the results in a generation of problem solving, which is the key feature in human development in a knowledge-based economy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for the nice presentation.